Welcome everybody to another episode of the Dragonus Podcastus. I am your host, Ponic, and with me again is Sister Byron, or Lady of the Light, however you want to say it.
Yes. I have many titles. I wear many hats.
And I wear many masks, but it's who we are underneath the skin that defines us who we are. Anyway, if you guys enjoy our podcast and want to support us, you can do so at patreon.com/Dragonus Podcastus. So, last week we talked about paladins, and now we're kind of getting into a more of a kind of a specific area within paladinship. We are talking about the Sisters of Valkyria sacred artifacts, or specifically the artifacts that were used by the Lady Valkyria. However, there's something we should note here is that these artifacts are not mutually exclusive to the sisters because there have been other individuals that have wielded them, but some may argue that these are more paladin-based weapons. However, and I'm inclined to agree with that, but that's still it's still kind of interesting that it turned out the way it did. Anyway, so for context, these artifacts are sacred items, weapons, and armor pieces that Valkyria herself used during the war with the demons in the shadow. And so many, like at least 100 years ago, she tasked our lovable dwarven blacksmith George to craft these items, as his smithing skills are legendary. And George, being who he is, never refuses a challenge. But in order to protect her against the evils that she would fight, George had to get help from the elves and get him to teach him how to do enchantment magic. And the elves agreed only because George had made their king a incredible blade and bow, and George put his inborn prejudice of the elves aside because he realized that the elves aren't much different from everybody else, and they were kind of going through their own monarchy coup during the Elven Civil War. So there's kind of a bit of sympathy there. And for 10 days and nights, George worked tirelessly to forge what he would consider his greatest works, never to be duplicated. And he made several art relics that would eventually become holy artifacts, which would be kept in the vault of the sacred temple of the sisters. So, things to note: all of the holy weapons and armor pieces have a loyalty, a pro-evil, and a channel energy enchantment placed upon them. So the loyalty enchantment is similar to the enchantment that's placed on Mjolnir, meaning that it will return on command to its owner's hand. But unlike Mjolnir, unless explicitly stated, only the person it was crafted for can wield it. And only those deemed by the ladies, Valkyria herself and or George, because he made these things, can use these artifacts realistically. And all the artifacts have an anti-evil security feature where if a being of evil attempts to use the artifact, it will cause them to be disintegrated by holy light. And the runes on the weapons are protection symbols and are what are used to charge the most powerful attacks of the weapons. And anyone who possesses any of the artifacts will have a special sigil branded upon their armor, and this mostly happens with sisters, but it has happened with Solaris Knights. So, starting off with our first artifact, we have the Holy Sword of the Valkyrie, and this one it looks like the Master Sword from Legend of Zelda, but it is that could not be further from the truth. It does have anti-evil properties, except it doesn't have the power to kill pig demons, so don't worry about that. But it does have some resemblance and properties to another famous sword from a famous cartoon, namely the Sword of Omens. Though its loyalty does remain with its original master, in times of need it will present itself to one who it deems worthy to wield its full, unrestrained power. And so when it stabs a regular squishy human, It doesn't create a gaping hole and no blood comes out. It also has the ability to slice heads clean off, no issue. It's particularly effective against entities of the shadow, demons, undead, and beings of pure evil. And so, within D&D terms, this thing is broken. This would be considered a legendary artifact. It does 12d8 holy damage plus 10d6 bonus damage versus undead beings and beings of pure evil. That's up to the DM's discretion how that works out. And it has four effects. So thanks to its special jewel and set in the middle, it has the ability to detect evil. It's not just detect evil in general. It's detecting a very specific evil. And then it has its special attack, its first special attack, which is the light symbol strike, which does 10d8 radiant damage. And then flashing strike, which does 2d20 radiant damage. And then other special ability, which is let there be light, which basically is like a flashbang going off, except it doesn't affect humans. It only affects those that are of pure evil. So next up is a particular. We've talked about this one before, but this one is Valkyria's Lance. This beauty right here is super special, and I'm very proud of this one in particular. It is actually what created the holy shield that protects Taunt, and it also defeated one of the Lich Lords of Agnos servants, a Death Wraith, or aka a Nazgul. It can also be chucked like a javelin, and it has special healing and protection powers. Its secret power, however, is when it deems the time right, it can start what is known as the Great Descent, which opens the sky and a portal from Valhalla to the mortal world, and all the dead warriors, Valkyries, and even Valkyria herself will descend and aid the one who called her. And this is one of the most sacred artifacts and is treasured by even Solaris Knights. And there has only been one Solaris Knight that has been deemed worthy to wield the lance to its fullest power, and that was a man named Aris Yuntil, and his sigil is actually inscribed on the blade. He was formerly a Solaris Prime, and he used the spear to deal with a traitor among the ranks of the Solaris Knights. He did die of his wounds after he returned from his fight, but he's the only one who not only was able to channel the spear's full power, but was able to use its other properties, save for the healing, because he realized it was his destiny to face the traitor and eventually passed on. And there's something too special about its abilities. As stated, it has special healing properties and it has a special shield, but that's pretty much it. Now, this next one is definitely a paladin's weapon. This is Tildir, the Avenging Light. And this is basically think of this as your oversized cleaver, or more accurately, a bastard sword. Now, fun fact, the bastard sword gets its name because it doesn't belong in either the one-handed or two-handed family of swords. It is also sometimes referred to as a hand-and-a-half sword. But anyway, this sword is unique because it can actually sense when an unjust death has taken place over miles away, and it gets stronger when focusing on a single murder or unclean death. So, for example, as let's say an inquisitor killing a prisoner after torturing them, an unfair trial resulting in a wrongful conviction leading to a execution that should not have been taking place. And what it basically does is, when on command, it shows the wielder the person who committed the unjust murder and basically pulls them towards that wielder, and the guilty person is actually sucked into a vortex and dropped at the feet of the wielder. And it is ultimately the holy light that the sword channels that is what delivers justice. So basically, this is a paladin weapon in all but function. It also has a weird effect where it collects the souls of the guilty, and when it is placed in a special spot in a certain space, in a certain place, all the guilty souls are basically deposited to hell. So you could say this is kind of a mail service for guilty souls. It's a lot of fun. Okay, next up, the Bow of Valkyria. There's nothing too special. It is just a bow. It's based on the Yumi bow that is used by samurai. But what makes this one super special is that you never have to worry about arrows or a quiver. You just pull the string back and the arrow materializes into whatever you need, save for dark light arrows. The bow's effect is that when using holy or light arrows specifically, they just go right through a person and go right through armor, shields, and nothing stops them, and they always hit their mark. It kind of reminds me of I think it was Perseus whose bow it was, but and when someone is actually struck by one of these holy arrows, time basically freezes for them, and they briefly see the realm of Valhalla and the opportunity they missed out on by committing to evil. This one it depends on the arrow you're using, so the damage varies quite a bit. So then you have the Shield of the Valkyrie, which is basically kind of like a medium buckler in a sense. This wasn't actually created by George, believe it or not. It was forged in the heart of a volcano using the flame of a gold dragon. And this beauty will stop almost anything save for concentrated necrotic beams or dark light arrows. Because that's one of the trade-offs they had to do. And it attaches to the special bracer and it acts like a medium buckler. And then you have a thing called the Angel's Grace, which is basically a special box like artifact that when you combine it with a special disc allows the sister in question to transform into a full-on Valkyrie for a brief time, even before they've unlocked their Valkyrie powers in their wings. And with this transformation, their strength, speed, endurance, and powers just skyrocket. It also boosts their healing powers as well, not to the point though that they can bring back the dead. The Angel of Grace is the only artifact not presently in the vault because it was actually broken by Valkyria's fight with the Lich Lord, and is currently under the care of one Sensei Varum, aka not Yoda. And then finally, you have the Angel's Tear. This is a special amulet worn around the neck that grants the wearer the wisdom of the Valkyrie and allows them to actually consult with Valkyria. The Valkyria actually comes like into physical form rather than just being a ghost. And then so finally, now let's quickly talking about the actual vault itself. The vault that these artifacts are stored in is protected by very, very, very powerful magic, with the combined efforts of Mordekainen, Tasha, and Xanathar of all people, despite what Xanathar is and what his worldviews. So only designated people and those with the sword and the lance marks on their arms can enter the vault. Because if you don't have that, then, well, you just get checked right out. And despite how long ago these artifacts were actually made, they are always kept in good condition by a group of people whose job is to clean, maintain, and most importantly of all, guard the artifacts. However, there is one last defense that stops any stolen artifact from actually leaving the vault. There's actually a barrier that secretly activates when the thief/desecrator/heathen crosses the line on the floor, and they are encompassed in what appears to be to an outside viewer to be a gelatinous cube. However, it is actually just a cylinder of time energy, which is similar to a time stop spell, except they're not frozen in place. It's just kind of like a prison of time energy. Anyway, so yeah, that's all the artifacts. And one more thing before we wrap up here is the sigil that sometimes you see on sisters' armor. It's this mark of the angel is specifically and it is magically branded onto the front of the armor chest piece, It represents the sisters' commitment to the organization, but also marks them for passage into Valhalla. And the organization has even included a special oath that every new sister takes upon receiving the sigil and becoming a new sister. And it reads something like this: In desperate day and darkest night, no shadow shall escape my sight. I pledge to do what is always right. Look to the clouds for Valkyria's light. Anyway, so yeah, that's all the artifacts. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think they sound really fascinating. And, you know, maybe a little broken, but, that's kind of the fun thing about having such a unique, special, one-of-a-kind item, right? Is that it's the only one in the world, right? So they can be a little bit broken because there is only one. There can be only one.
Yeah, and unlike some like other fantasy like weapons and armor and all that, they don't. It takes quite a lot to break them. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, before we actually officially wrap up, I have two more things here. So this is the armor that the sister wears when they go Valkyrie mode, if it'll load up. And as you can see, they do get their wings. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then my personal favorite one is it's a special cloak. It's kind of like the cloak that Doctor Strange wears, where like it has its own
Mm-hmm.
personality. It's but except it doesn't hinder you. It kind of mimics some of your emotional reactions, and like Doctor Strange's cloak, it has well levitation, and on command it can you know like wrap itself around a person's face or
Mm-hmm.
bind somebody's hand, and it's really cool when when it comes back to you and you just like swing it around your neck, and it's so cool that that one shot of him walking along and he just puts it on. It's
Mm-hmm.
so badass. Yeah. Other than that, there is the special helmet that Valkyria actually wore, but there's nothing really too special about it because it actually kind of set the standard for how the armor um of all sisters was to be basically forged and what it was its standard. It kind of
Mm-hmm.
reminds me of the 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 war helmets samurai wore, except it doesn't have like the face the lower face covering.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah, it and there's not and it's as said before, there's only like a select few who have wielded these artifacts, and
Mm-hmm.
there's only a specialized group of people that can actually go into the vault, take these artifacts, and actually use them. And it kind of reminds, yeah, it does remind me quite a bit of Mjolnir and how like Captain America had to kind of prove himself. He did kind of make the hammer budge in Age of Ultron, which kind of made Thor concerned, but he still kind of laughed it off because Cap wasn't ready. And then finally, well, we had the big moment where Cap actually got to wield Mjolnir and use its full unrestrained power. Which, by the way, which talking about Mjolnir and speaking of Norse mythology, despite what you might think, Mjolnir is actually pretty badass. It may look like just a small little hammer that like you can use like hammer and nails or something when you're building something, but this thing, getting hit by this thing hurts.
Mm-hmm.
I'm surprised that Thanos still has a chin after taking that. Not to mention he took like a bunch of lightning to the face.
Yeah.
I'm surprised he was to get up. And then he had the bit where like um Thor's like, no, give me that. You have the little one. And it's like, I mean, Stormbreaker doesn't have the same enchantment as Mjolnir, so I mean, almost anybody could wield it. So it really depends how you look at it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so next week is gonna be a wild adventure. And speaking of which, since we're kind of winding down, if you haven't already seen it, go see Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. It's, for what I heard, it's pretty good. I'm not gonna spoil it because I haven't seen it myself, but for what I understand, it's pretty good. And it's a good way to send off the franchise, despite, what Kingdom of the Crystal Skull did. But anyway, we'll see you guys next week.